I think we're live. Welcome to Tip Off. Things don't seem to be clicking along, and it didn't give me the little notification we're live, but then it seems to be. So we're live. It's Tip Off. I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. So glad to have you with us today. Thank you very much for tuning in, and welcome to the home opener. Probably feels a lot more real to you with a home opener than it does to me, who've been as I've been rolling for a while, and it feels like it's been going on. But the Blazers are in town. The home opener is upon us. I'm going to try to do a better job on tip-off this year of giving you a little bit of a game preview every time we play someone. So if my prep is up to a point where I can give you a game preview, I'm going to do a little bit of that. And then I'm going to hit the NBA 5, and then I'll hit our big picture Jazz topic. So just for those of you that only have a few minutes to grab shows on game days, it gives you a little bit of a quick preview to what's going on today. By the way, if you join the Locked On Sports Google Plus community, you will get a little invite every time we do tip-off, I think is the way it works. I think they notify you of that. Also, the question and answer feature is up and will appear for you. Third thing is I generally know when I'm doing tip-off, and last year I used to post it so that it was a notification to, and I'm going to try to get back to doing that. I think it helps you. So feel free to send a Q&A question in off this. Love to get your questions. And then if you subscribe to the Locked On Sports Google Plus community, you should be able to get this notification. And I love the Locked On Sports Google Plus community. The guys have done an amazing job. I use it all the time. I actually really use it a lot to kind of catch up on Utah and BYU news. That I'm not following as closely. The Two Guys on the 12 podcast is up and available to you if you are a Pac-12 fan and want to get that today. All right, let's do our pins across America, pins across the world. A few of you, not all, don't get excited, but a few of you got an email from me last night. So a few of you are going to have a very good night tonight because you actually followed through last time and didn't feel totally offended by the fact that I got way more emails than I thought for those of you who followed that whole little saga. Pins Across the World is your chance to email me and tell me where you're from, what your backstory is about following the Utah Jazz and sharing who you are as part of this Jazz community. And we'd like to get that for you each and every day here on the show. That's kind of our thing this year. Well, that is not loading up for me right now, so it's going to let me just do the game preview first. I'm going to change orders and do a little quick thing. First thing, Damian Lillard today obviously is playing great. Keep an eye on this, though. Lillard wants to drive left almost all the time. So even if he comes off a pick and roll right, you'll watch him cross back to his left. If he's playing isolation one-on-one game, he shoots 47% when he goes left, 51% right on the isolations. So Damian wants to head left more than anything else. So watch that. The Jazz will try to deal with that. Damian's favorite move is to come around the pick and bend back underneath. So that's worth keeping an eye on. The Blazers have the third most amount of three-point shots being taken right now in the NBA. They're only 18th in offensive efficiency, 12th in defense. It's only through 4 games, but that's how they're playing right now. They're jacking the three, so the Jazz will have to close out wide. And then keep an eye on C.J. McCollum. Last year's spot shooting, one of the pure best spot shooters in the NBA. So if you get C.J. McCollum with a catch and shoot that is unguarded or open off penetration by Dame, that's a problem for the Jazz. So I would keep an eye on those are kind of the things there for you. Myers Leonard is their big power forward. Don't be surprised if he shoots threes. He made 47 threes last year after making 3 of his first years. He's added that into his game heavily. The only other note for you specifically to them and what they're doing right now, Ed Davis crashing the offensive boards, but they're not a great offensive rebounding team overall, and they're having a hard time taking care of the ball right now. So those are your quick little notes. I'm going to try to do that for you before every game. My prep's up to the point, tomorrow will be a little tough on a back end of a back-to-back, but I'll try. All right, Heather Taylor is our pin across the world. It's from Clovis, California. I'm a stay-at-home mom with 4 kids residing in Clovis, California, but a diehard Jazz fan since I was a little girl. I vividly remember the shot by John Stockton while watching the game with my dad and brothers in the basement of our house in Idaho. I now look forward to eating my breakfast every morning while watching tip-off, and I'm so thankful for social media, NBA League Pass, so I can keep up with the Jazz. Keep it up. Thank you for all you do for the fans. Heather, good morning. Happy breakfast, and hope those 4 kids are off to school well this morning. All right, there was a few things about NBA 5 time, a few things about last. By the way, tickets are still available for tonight. Tickets are still available. So get out there. Let's pack the place. Always a good walk-up. How about this? Home teams, according to Bobby Marks on Twitter, it was very good. Home teams are 25-34 so far. 25-34 so far. How about that? Few notes last night of games of interest. Bulls blowout and then bitter afterwards. This is going to be the problem the Bulls have all year is the fact that they were good under Tom Thibodeau. Maybe they were tired of it. Maybe they wore them out. The front office in Thibodeau fell apart, but they were good, and they allowed 130 points last night to Charlotte. Charlotte, after that, is one of the top 5 offensive teams in the league. Again, let's wait 10, 15 games, 20 games in to see whether these data points are right. Indiana, surprising win last night, but interesting in that win, a real dark spot in that win for Indiana is as the game slowed down, they fell apart again. 9 points in the fourth quarter last night by Indiana. They just can't play the way they're playing, or they're going to have to change their personnel, how they're playing. George Hill's probably not the right point guard for him. His contract's so cheap, I don't know if they'll move him, but I would suspect that Frank Vogel reverts out of that system at some point here in time and tries to get something going. Paul George is 20 of 60 so far for the season. Little disturbing. One, little mockable after he says he's going to be the best player in the world. A little disturbing in the sense that he is still, we haven't seen Paul George ever return from that leg injury yet. Atlanta beats Miami last night in Miami. That's a really good win for Atlanta. Wade was in and out of the game, but Atlanta's suddenly 4-1 again. Atlanta lost an opening night. They're back to being 4-1. They're back to being the real threat. Atlanta's the threat to Cleveland. This is a team that won 60 games. Everyone wants to worry about it. Kent Bazemore looks an awful lot like DeMarre Carroll, and I don't mean this disrespectfully to DeMarre Carroll, but I know everyone's in love with DeMarre, and he made huge strides. But we saw DeMarre here in Utah. He was a nice player. I loved him for his bowling, his energy, his attitude, his approach. He's not that special. He's not unique. I believe that they can replace DeMarre Carroll with some other version of him, and Kent Bazemore seems to be that right now. The New Orleans Pelicans are just in flat-out trouble. There's no other way to look at it. The New Orleans Pelicans are 0-4, and their defense is just a mess. And it's interesting, the more you kind of talk around the league and listen around the league, Anthony Davis is incredible. He's one of the best players in the league, but the jump that the media has given him of becoming the MVP and that caliber player, when you start talking inside the league, you start to hear otherwise. That maybe he's not at that mentality yet. He doesn't have that approach. The other one last night, and I was tweeting about it, which is probably really boring to you for those who follow me on Twitter at Locked On Sports. Orlando was just getting shot after shot at the rim. Last year, New Orleans allowed the most amount of points of any team in the league in the restricted area. They allowed the most amount of shots by a million miles. It didn't look like anything was different last night. Alexis Ajinka, who I do like, actually, 7-footer, has no impact on the rim. I don't know what his stats view numbers are, but I'll tell you, you look at it. It looks as though he has no impact on the rim. And Orlando just got to the rim seemingly whenever they wanted last night. And I don't know. I mean, hey, they're short a few guys. There's some things, right? There's parts of this we don't want to. They're short Tyreek. They're short there's some things that they don't have figured out yet. But the shot chart last night, here, I'll pull it up actually. Orlando took 90 shots. 43 of them were within like 5 feet of the basket. Here's the shot chart from last night's Orlando game. Okay. So that's 60. The league average is 55% inside this, whatever we're going to call it, 5, 6, 7 foot. It's not all restricted area here. Orlando shot 63%. The league average shot, the distribution league average on that is 47. They took 43 of their night. They took about 50% of their shots there, right about league average. If we base it to basic zones, it gets even more stunning. 21 of 29 at the rim. League average is 61%. They were at 72. There was no one was holding them back for New Orleans. They took 33% of their shots there, which is higher than the league distribution. It's, by the way, league average right now in the restricted area is 61%. In this little paint area, there's a huge increase in shots in this area, and it's 43%. Mid-range jumpers are still death. Three-pointers around and around. But these guys, New Orleans just doesn't defend at all. I don't know if it'll start. I can't imagine Tyreek Evans is going to start suddenly making them defend. Anthony Davis was 3 of 12 last night. A few other notes from last night. Toronto beat Dallas. The real bummer on that one is if you watch that game, Dirk just couldn't take over late. Toronto goes to 4-0. Memphis, by the way, is now 3-2 with a win over Sacramento, and Denver beat LA. The Lakers are awful. They're really awful. The fourth quarter numbers in that Dallas-Toronto game. Dallas scores 18 points. It's a tie game. It's I think it was tied going into the fourth or within one. It's a one-possession game. I mean, it's Dirk time. You're turning the game over to Dirk, and suddenly Dirk looked very much like the European Dirk. He goes 1 of 4 in the 9 minutes he plays that quarter. Darren goes 1 of 6 in that fourth quarter. They didn't look right, and I'm not sure. Dwight Powell, who's out of Stanford, who I really do like, but not like is becoming a key player for them. Powell plays 26 minutes last night, has 10 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists. I like him a lot because he can pass as a big. All right. There's a great article done by Nylon Calculus. They do super work. And they did one of their deep dives, which I love that phrase because that's always what I talk about us doing here, is digging deep. And I think I'm still on share, but that's fine because I actually want you to see this. They did a study on lineups. And first off, something I've always talked about, if you've been a part of us on the show, is that I strongly believe that starting matters, because if you don't start, you're already limited to 32 minutes a night if you play the max, right? There's 12 minutes or about 36. Now, this is team playing time distribution from last year is the graph you're looking at. And so what the top is when all 5 starters were in the game. And the first thing you jump out is that the Clippers were playing 20 minutes a game of all their starters. So maybe let's put this in context. What this research found out is that teams' 5 starters play on average 14 minutes a night on the floor together. Teams play with 4 starters 9 minutes a night, with 3 starters 8 minutes a night, with 2 starters 8 minutes a night, and with 1 starter about 6 minutes a night. I can't tell you how many dinner debates I have had on the road with NBA coaches on this concept. This is a really important concept to coaches. This is something that I have tried to theorize what's the right thing to do, what's the wrong thing to do. Frank Vogel in Indiana did some really neat things a few years ago where they had a huge percentage of their time had at least 4 starters on the floor. I'm a believer, as much as you can work your substitutions to have 4 of your starters on the floor at the same time. Maybe you don't always have to have your top 5 on what you're doing. When you look at this, I actually kind of like what Orlando did last year, but it's an interesting thing. There aren't many minutes of just 4 starters on the floor. It's you either have 5 or you kind of drop into your 3 and your 2 very quickly here. There's many minutes on the floor every night of teams with 4 starters as they do with 3 starters or with 2 starters. I actually think this is where there's some real math wins to be had here, that you can do some things interestingly and kind of manage your game, that you're not substituting all your starters in and out and rotate them back in if in fact they're your 5 best players. Now, with us, you got to figure out how Trey and Alec fit in this and what the best thing to do is. Here's some of the things that I thought jumped out at me from this lineup data that I thought was so good by Nylon Calculus. Houston and Miami only played about 1 minute a night without a starter on the floor. Least amount of time with only one starter is about 7 minutes a night. The teams that had the least amount of time with just one starter on the floor were Minnesota had it, but about 7. Cleveland, they had at least two starters on the floor for about 41 of the 48 minutes. I really like that. Cleveland had, I think, even for only 5 minutes a night. The Clippers played 30 minutes a night with 4 starters. I think it's really smart. Now, the side note is the Clippers ended up with very few moments of 3 starters or 2 starters on the floor. They ended up very quickly into the no starters or 1 starters, just trying to survive with bench units. It's a great debate. Are you better off putting 5 bench guys in for 4 or 5 minutes a night so that it yields you 30 minutes a night of having your best guys on the floor? I think the answer to that is yes, but you've got to find a way to survive. Jerry Sloan used to slow the game down, take the air out of the ball. I would say, maybe having 5 starters on the floor is not that important, but having 4 starters is. So, in our case, your first substitution could be Trey for Neto, and while your next substitution, likely is Alec for Rodney, now you're down to 3 starters. Well, maybe you've got to, in our case, it's a little funky. Maybe you got to make sure that your next substitution is Rodney back in for Trey. So you're now playing the triple wing while Trevor comes in for Rudy. Right now you're still back at 3 starters. And then if your next substitution is Rudy back in for Derek and Trevor's still in the game, you're still at 3 starters. And your next substitution is Neto back in for Gordon, and now you're back to your point guard and you got 3 starters on the floor. We can play around with it on another day where I put out the spreadsheet and we try to play it. I've done this before. It's hard. It's really hard. It's actually would be good. I think we should do it because I think you'd see how hard it is. So anyway, I thought this was really fabulous. The next stage of what they did, and this is just such good work, is they went and found out the amount of minutes that your team played against starters versus non-starters. So Trevor Booker last year played just 25 minutes a night against starters. Now, I'm not entirely clear what they defined as starters. Was it 3 starters, 4 starters? What is it exactly? Because I wasn't clear exactly on that. Rudy Gobert, we talk about how Rudy's going through a new transition this year. He played only 45% of his minutes last year against starters. Favors, on the other end, 62% of his minutes. It was interesting on Cantor. Cantor played most of his minutes against starters. When he did play bench minutes, his field goal percentage went up nearly 11 percentage points. Favors, when he gets bench units, goes up about 4 percentage points. Well, here's what gets interesting to that. If teams are going to play small, Derek maybe plays the whole first quarter, all 12 minutes. Rudy goes out at the 6-minute mark. Now Derek goes to center, starts posting up on backup centers. Right? Maybe by playing the entire first quarter, Derek ends up getting some backup center minutes. If starters play only 14 minutes a night together, if you start to think about what that 14 minutes a night is, it's probably 5 minutes in the first quarter, 5 minutes in the third quarter, 4 minutes to close the game. It's not very much. Or the other angle is you really, as I'm saying, you should be running that 8 or 9 minutes. 8 or 9, keep that out there longer. These are really your best players. Keep that group out there longer. Try to get your edge there. A lot of Sloan teams actually won with the bench. Their starters would be even though, and then Harpering and the crew came off the bench, particularly when that Darren Williams, Carlos Boozer, Mehmet Okur team was young. If you go back and look at the plus minus, they won with their bench. It's a really interesting debate on what the right way to play this is. Gordon Hayward last year played 61% of his minutes against starters. He and Favors were the highest. No real surprise there, right? And Trevor was the lowest. Thought that was really fascinating. Yesterday, the Jazz had practice. It was awesome. I try to keep some in fairness, I get access that not other people get. Aaron and Jody are busting their ass. I try not to violate, suddenly sit out here every day and do stuff they can't do. It's not fair. I just want to share. Yesterday's practice was awesome. There was a movement in my mind offensively from, okay, I've given you a million set plays. Now let's just understand the game. Let's play with a space. Understand spacing. We've shown these plays this week about how important some of the spacing. Huge focus on spacing and huge focus on that play where we showed with Neto where he was moving before he caught the ball. Go and catch. Go and catch. Be moving forward. Incredible play. Alec Burks, top of the key, caught, boom, swung it immediately. I've never seen it. Alex got progress to be made still, and he's making it. I made a mistake on yesterday's show. I'll do this every now and then I try to go back. And I was talking. We talked for 30 minutes straight. Every now I start to say something, and I realize, maybe not so. I was talking about Rodney Hood's defense, and I think I just kind of poo-pooed it a little bit. So I went and talked to some of the coaches about it yesterday. The word I got was incredible focus for the entire defensive possession, great length, super game plan execution, and really high-level engagement. I think I undersold how good he is defensively, which gets to the conversation yesterday we had about how great our starting five is defensively, how important that might be, and now Alec and Trey, who are not as good defensive players as Neto and Rodney. Alec actually is beginning to do a pretty good job defensively. So is Trey. Both of them, they're not as good as Rodney and Neto, but don't throw them into the bad category just because that's the case. They both have made huge strides and are making incredible efforts. And so from there, maybe it's better for them because they're not playing starter guys and they can even be better defensively. Things are coming together a little bit. We'll see. I had an incredible sit down with Quinn yesterday. And what I did is I just ran through for some production pieces we run on our broadcast, all 14 players. Dante, we didn't do. In the midst of that, he made these incredibly insightful comments about our players. And so what I'm going to do on tip-off, starting maybe tomorrow, because I got to re-listen to it all and take some notes, I'm going to just highlight a singular player and share with you kind of what Quinn said and some of the stuff. Some of the stuff was incredible. His Trey Lyles stuff was really brilliant. I just want to share that with you, and then I'll dig back into it. But he basically brought up the point that there are maybe one, maybe two players that enter the NBA out of college or out of Europe that can just play their normal game. Think about that for a second. So the way all these guys have ever played in Europe or in college, when they come to the NBA, they can't play the same game. Jahlil Okafor is finding this out right now. D'Angelo Russell's probably finding this out. Karl Anthony Towns might be so good he can just play his regular game. Trey Lyles can't. Howell Neto really can't, but he's got enough experience. He's kind of figured out. Tibor Pleiss can't at all. And some really interesting stuff from Quinn on Tibor and the process that he's going on. So the concept is every single one of these young kids who enter this league, go back to Trey, Burke, now 3 years in, go back to Gordon's progression, go back to Derek's progression, now go to Trey Lyles. They can't play the game they've always played. They have to now adjust and adapt and change their game. And it takes them a little while to come to the realization that they can't play the game they've always played. That's the first thing that happens is, I can't do this. I can't play that way. It's an interesting point. All right, that is tip-off today. I got to get down to shoot around. Quick question coming in from Justin Brown. I want to start taking these questions. I know it's only a few games in, but do you think the Jazz playoff chances are better, worse, or same as before? Well, New Orleans doesn't look very good, so that, and I think they'll figure it out, but their injuries and just their adjustment. I was talking to a coach yesterday who talked about how everything they used to do were set plays, and now they're playing off just kind of feel, and it's an incredible adjustment for them. So they'll figure it out as the year goes on, but there's going to be a learning curve that's difficult for them. So maybe in that sense, but really we're 3 games in. Here was my question, and I think if you've listened to Tip-Off, you know, truly statistically, last 30 games of an NBA season do not translate to what a team does the next year. Okay. We've played 3 not very good offensive teams. Detroit's okay. And our defense has been amazing. It's number 1 in the league right now, number 2 in effective field goal percentage defense, number 2 in turnovers, number 6 in defensive rebound. It's amazing. Oh, I was going to do something about pace. Shoot, I'm not going to get to that today. I lied. I'll try to get to it tomorrow. So the darn it, I really said I was going to do that. Anyway, the question I have is whether or not our defensive prowess would translate. Here's the quick thought on pace. I'll give you the details tomorrow. We're the lowest pace play of team in the league. It's because our defense is so good. Our offense is actually using possessions much earlier in the shot clock than it did a year ago. Much earlier. The defense is so good at slowing games down. So our pace of play being low is good. All right, that is tip-off. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks to Justin for the question. And I'll update you on Snapchat at DLock9. Instagrams, if it's available. Cool picture of Gordon yesterday as the last guy in the gym working out. And at Locked On Sports throughout the day. Tune in tonight. Join us. Our day in history is a good one tonight. And Ron will be back with you. Home opener. I look forward to seeing you at the arena. Thanks very much. See you. Bye.